in the back, when you came down those stairs, did y'all look to your left and see those chunky boulders, maybe about this big, tan-colored boulders, reddish-colored boulders? A few more about to join us. And something that I like to mention, and I'll try to remember to mention it at each of our stops, especially when we're about to go into an area where we'll be single file for a while. So this part of the cave, we're all kind of spread out, but there will be some very narrow areas where we'll be single file. And what tends to happen, we call it the slinky effect or the accordion effect. We kind of get stretched out into one big long line of people. And then we'll get to those stops, and the back of the group has to move a little bit faster to catch up and keep up and close those gaps. So I'll just mention that the slowest pace is actually going to be at the front of the group. Now it seems counterintuitive, but if the slowest walking person was in the back, what's going to happen? We're going to get more stretched out, right? But if we have the slowest people, if you either prefer or need the slower pace up front, that helps to keep us all together as a group. So I'll just mention that at each of our stops, and if anyone wants to move their way to the front, feel free to do so. All right, well, I can officially welcome you all inside Mammoth Cave now. What do you think so far? It's pretty big, right?
Yeah.
Now, although this isn't the initial first big room they discovered, it gives you an example of some of these big, massive rooms. If anyone did take a historic tour of that rotunda room, that first big room you get to by the natural entrance is what made those early visitors name it Mammoth. So never found any mammoths in Mammoth Cave, both that animal and this cave, just named for being big. All right, well, this is the end of the cave. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks for coming. Now, of course, I'm kidding. We're just beginning our journey, but this really is the quote, end of the cave. Yeah, and before that entrance was blasted out in 1931, this would have been your turnaround point. That's right. So the looks on people's faces when they told them that, they'd say, all right, hope you enjoyed it now. We go all the way back. They said their faces just looked dismal. They dropped. So they nicknamed this room Dismal Hollow because of that. But the official name of this passage is Sandstone Avenue. Sandstone Avenue. But guess what? All these rocks around us are limestone. So why did they call it Sandstone Avenue?
Sandstone washed down.
Yes, exactly right. The sandstone washed down. So we came down those stairs. Did y'all look to your left and see my flashlight sitting there, lighting up those tan-colored, reddish-colored blocks or chunks of boulders? Yeah, so that was an ancient sinkhole that collapsed in, closing this passage and separating it from the historic section. Now, this was an ancient collapse many thousands of years ago, probably before the first human ever set foot anywhere near Mammoth Cave. But that connected, or rather disconnected, this big canyon-style passage with the big canyons in that historic section. All right, so to get to this part of the cave in those early days, from that historic section, tourists started there in 1816. They'd have to walk for miles, cross pits, cross the underground river, walk another mile that we're about to do over here, get to the end of the cave many hours, many miles later. But this was the end of the long journey, the long route. Yeah, so we're going to be doing it a little bit in reverse right now. We're going back. But this part of the cave was discovered in 1841 by a young man named Stephen Bishop. And I will talk more about him at one of our later stops inside the cave. Maybe some of y'all are already familiar with Stephen Bishop. He's a giant in our history, our early celebrated cave guide. But this passage, Sandstone Avenue, we're going to descend, go around another left turn into Cleveland Avenue, and let's go see what Stephen Bishop found down there. I already gave you a little bit of a preview. Almost immediately, you'll start seeing the sparkling, glittering gypsum formations. We'll walk for a few minutes till we find a nice wide area with some nice gypsum where we can stop and highlight it and talk about how that stuff forms. Are your eyes